In today's video we are going to repose the push-fit single-posed Screamer Killer miniature from the Leviathan box set, and it's coming right up. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. So I have two Tyranid halves of the Leviathan box set. I've already built one half, and today I'm going to start building the second half. However, like my Indomitus Necron videos that I did, I'm going to show you how I'm going to convert these, because they are single posed miniatures, and well, specifically on the bigger miniatures, I feel if I have two of exactly the same looking miniatures, it's just not going to look that great. So I'm going to try and change the poses. Now, of course, the first miniature that I wanted to start with was the Screamer Killer, because not only is this an awesome miniature, I think if you have two of these miniatures with exactly the same pose, they're not actually going to look that great together on the table. So I wanted to change the pose of this guy. So the first thing I did is clip all of the pieces off of the sprue and of course clean up all of the mould lines. And then I took a closer look at my built miniature. Now it's fair to say that the body is, well, fairly one pose. It's like a massive chunk of plastic just all glued together. And it's going to be quite difficult to change the body. I mean, even the head is sort of fixed into position. I'm thinking the only real places that we can change are going to be the arms and potentially the legs. Now, the first thing I noticed about the right leg is he's standing on a piece of terrain. And I was thinking, well, how about I cut off that piece of terrain, and that might help change the pose. And actually the leg is angled on that piece of terrain, so without that terrain there, he's going to be standing almost on one leg. He almost looks like he's running. So I thought that is where I would start. So I got the leg sections that had that piece of terrain on, and I got some clippers and I started clipping off the plastic. Now I had to do this, of course, very carefully. I didn't want to cut into the hoof. Now, of course, the hoof is attached to the piece of terrain. So after I cut off the main sections with the clippers, I then went in with my knife and I just took off some of the remaining pieces of terrain on the hoof and just made it as flat as I could. Now, as I said, when I glue this new leg onto the base, the other leg is going to be in the air, giving me this sort of running pose. Now, there is a little nodule on the end of the foot which is supposed to push into the base, so of course I cut that off and made it flat. Once I'd completed that, I actually glued the head and legs together, just leaving the arms not glued. Now, that foot is hollow in the middle, and my plan is to put some green stuff in there when I glue it to the base. And as you can see, when he's on the base, he definitely now looks like he's running, and actually the head is in a different position, so the head looks a bit different to the original. So now it's time to work on the arms, and the arms we have two options. We could potentially cut it at the elbow joint and maybe repose it, but what I noticed with these miniatures is they are incredibly detailed, and any cutting and remodeling that we would have to do would be really hard. So I thought the easiest thing to do was just try to change the position of the shoulder joint rather than the elbow joint. Now, of course, these are push fit miniatures. We've got two pieces that join the arm into the shoulder joint, so I decided to cut those pieces off. And once they're off, it's actually quite easy to reshape that section into almost a ball. So what I did is cut those off with my clippers, and then I got my knife and I just reshaped that little section. Now, after I took the bulk of it off with my knife, I then went in with a file and I just filed down the area to give me a nice smooth ball socket. Now, obviously, whilst I was shaving the pieces down, I was dry fitting them into the sockets just to see how they would look where I need to shave them, and sort of getting an idea of how I was going to repose these arms. Okay, so once I'd done all four of these joints, it was time to have a look at how I was going to put them to the miniature. Now, the miniature, of course, has an area for these joints to go into, and I could potentially just stuff some green stuff in there and just push this into place. However, that joint is fairly flat, Now there's 2 holes in there, so I thought I would drill out the holes and cut a bigger hole out. Now I've already done one of these just to experiment, and it worked really well. So all I did is I drilled out the 2 holes that were there with a 3mm drill piece, and then I got my knife and I just cut the hole just to make it a little bit bigger. Again, just dry fitting the arm into place. The idea is to get that ball joint into the miniature with no big gaps. We will still use some green stuff just to make things sort of fit a little bit nicer. Now you can use a file as well as your knife just to widen this hole and just make it the right shape. Okay, after I did this, I noticed I had some bits inside the miniature which sort of rattled and I just couldn't get them out of the hole. So what I did is I got some glue and I put some glue through the hole into the top section of the miniature. Then I shook it so that all the pieces went down into that area and the pieces just glued to the inside of the miniature and it stopped rattling. And now I was ready to repose these arms. Like I said, I've worked out now roughly where all of the arms are going to go. I've got the holes cut out, everything looks good, but I am going to use some green stuff in the holes as well, just to, well, A, make the joint a little bit more secure, and B, just to give me the option to move the arms on the green stuff as they dry. And of course I'm going to put some green stuff in the foot as well. However, when I looked at the foot, the hoof was at a slight angle. It didn't look straight, and also it meant that my foot at the back wasn't off of the ground quite as much as I wanted it to be. So what I did is I got a little file and I just filed the hoof down on one side. The idea was to keep it flat but just change the angle of the hoof slightly. Where it was on the terrain, it just wasn't sort of level, so it was sort of almost going to one side. So that's what I did. I just filed it down and just changed the pose of that hoof just very slightly, just to make it leaning forward and to the side a little bit more. Okay, so next we are going to use some green stuff. Now if you're not sure what this is, I do have a video about green stuff linked in the description below. But it's an epoxy that you mix together, and then after about 3 or 4 hours it dries and goes hard. So I've mixed some up, and as always I've mixed way too much up, so that's not a problem. I'm just going to make some Necron crystals from the leftovers. But what I did is I put some of this into the foot and I flattened it off, and then I got some green stuff and I pushed them into the joints of the arm. So just a small ball into the hole. Now make sure that the ball isn't so small it goes right through the hole, so it's got to be slightly bigger than the hole. I just squeezed it in, and then I used my tool just to flatten it around the edges so that when we push the arm into place, the green stuff just doesn't sort of splay everywhere. Now as I did this, of course I was checking the pose as well, so just pushing the arms into place, making a little indentation into the green stuff, working out where I wanted each arm to go. So I gradually did this for each arm, and then I was ready to glue. Okay, so you can see I've rolled up the surplus green stuff into a rod. I'm going to let that dry, and that will eventually be made into Necron crystals. And now I'm ready to glue on the arms. So I use some super glue gel, and I put the glue into the actual arm socket itself. And then I got to the arm and I just worked out where I wanted it to be, and I pushed it into place. Now the super glue will definitely glue this all together, but where the green stuff is still wet and mouldable, it meant that I could move the arm around slightly so that I could make sure I get the best position for each arm as I glued them. Now of course I wanted the arms to be totally different from the original, which are all splayed out, so with this particular pose I made the arm sort of almost going underneath him as he was running, and I thought that would make him look the most different from the original. So all I had to do then was tidy up some of the green stuff in a couple of the arms. There wasn't too much to do, and there he is, all done. I'm really happy how he came out. He probably doesn't look quite as cool as the original pose, which to be fair looks awesome. However, he definitely looks a lot different, and that was the whole idea of this conversion. Now when I have both of these miniatures on the table, they're going to look different. Now, what did you think of my conversion? Let me know in the comments box below. If you want to find out more about green stuff, then here's a video for you to watch next. Here is a playlist of all of my Indomitus Necron conversions, and here's some Tyranid videos which I think you may enjoy.